So I'm Nadir Pearson, currently a senior at Brown University, also founder of SMART, which is the Student at One Alliance for Research and Transparency. And I've been in the space for about 3 years now, working with these individuals here. It's been really great to see myself really professionally and with this industry, kind of parallel. But I got into the space just because I originally did my own research back in being a consumer growing up. And so once I figured that out and saw a lot of headlines coming up,
Yo.
Hey, yeah, I thought you had a cold.
Is that better?
No, it was in your esophagus.
Yes. Now. I heard it was done muffled, but I didn't know if it was like because of where I'm at. All right, word. Thank you. So, Nadir Pearson, SMART, college cannabis, really focusing on students and bringing that next generation into play. And as I mentioned, just been working with these folks for 3 years now, since I was about 19. So really, this industry is for anybody, all generations, and it's been really important for myself to be able to educate my generation so that they can educate their parents and their families, and also provide us opportunities, like I said, in these career pathways. Because when we think about innovation, you hear a lot of this coming from college campuses. So to miss us, to miss Howard down the street is going to be missing a huge, huge opportunity to really, push forward this community and the Black experience as a whole.
Hi, my name is Mary. I got into this space as co-founder of Canna Inclusive with 2 other Black women, Tanya Bentley Flash and Charlotte Antoinette. I originally come and still am in tech and advertising, working within agencies and working with tech platforms for over 10 years. I became more serious within the cannabis space as someone who has a background and legacy based upon family backgrounds and things of that nature, mostly because of a chronic ailment that I developed in 2012, Crohn's. And over time, I discovered that more medicinal study and certain cultivar worked for the gaps that were in my endocannabinoid system. I also started using cannabis to make medicines for people that were going through transition as a part-time death doula. So I do help people try to transition not with so much pain, given where they're moving on to in the next life. I do think that just upon the cannabis inclusive has grown into is that we started doing way more awareness in business and advocacy because at this point, in our opinion, cannabis talks to each other in the vacuum, and we're being missed in the vacuum. Not only that, but there's a lot of lies and not real clear transparency as to what really is going on out here. There's not a lot of time either. I'm just being real. And so for all of us up here, we hate panels, I'm gonna tell you right now, because we're all very aware in our heads screaming
What's going on?
in a different way to ourselves that like, this shit is moving in a way that people just are still missing. And we don't wanna be up here telling y'all to go read another advocacy playbook because you need to do it so we can talk to you about the real shit that's actually happening. So, that's kind of where we're evolving. And, I'm happy to be here. I'm at my CBC limit. There's only so much posturing I can do in a week. But I'm glad to be part of this conversation, and I've been happy to touch points and work with everybody in this room in different ways and on this panel. So thank you.
Yes.
We're still going over panel members.
Well, good morning. My name is Dashida Dawson, and I'm the weed head.
Hey.
Hey.
That was Dashida Johnson, the lead head.
Yeah, so I'm a self-proclaimed corporate to cannabis crossover. I am classically trained in the way of science and business and have spent a lot of my career prior to getting into the cannabis industry really building big brands and finding the white space and helping big companies figure out how to market to us. Coming into the industry was really not this big business epiphany. It was personal. It had a lot to do with my own autoimmune issues. So I worked very closely with my sisters in our business, and we were able to launch a management consulting firm where 99.9% of the money that we made in this industry came from white men. That doesn't mean that that's not how we spent our money, but
Don't get mad at that white check either.
but that is the case.
Right.
While doing so, I felt like I needed to document the experience, which is how I became the weed head. Tom came from. Honestly, as a digital expert, I saw it as an SEO move, and it really still is my best investment. $11.99 that quickly turned into $1,500. Like in 2 months, someone wanted it, and now everybody wants that, right? But I wanted to make sure I was documenting it because there weren't people of color. I was the only Afro in the room. I started in Arizona. I got accused of so many crazy things in that red state, and then moved into Nevada and California, and then finally made my way back east. The Weed Head now is really taking off in the sense that I provide education, empowerment, and an opportunity to buy things that I know have been proven to work and are great accessories. So there's an e-commerce component. I'm like everyone else. I'm seeing the whole, and I think we need education. And so I took everything that we learned as being management consultants, building a lot of small and big businesses from the ground up, and I try to make it into a very easy workbook that, while it is primarily being purchased by white people, it was made for us, by us in that concept. It is a workbook because you have to do work. And it isn't just about having conversations and trying to figure out what the next networking event is going to do for you. So I share the sentiment, not directly, but I share the sentiment that, we've been doing this for a while, but I think these are the cheat codes. And so How to Succeed in the Cannabis Industry is the first workbook in the Weed Head workbook series, followed by The Real Science of Cannabis, followed by a home grow. So I feel like you got to really understand the science before you can get in, before you can understand the opportunity. But we have health justice. We are not getting the right treatments for the diseases that we have prevalent in our community. So I focus a lot there. I think we need social justice as well, and I come from East New York, so I'm very, very, I got problems on you already. But I'm sure, there's a degree of separation, and certainly cannabis or marijuana is part of that. And I think we need to change that narrative, but it does start with recognizing that this is a plant that is for our health of our communities, and it starts there. If you're not alive, you can't vote, and you can't advocate. And it's hard enough for us to manage that way. So, yeah, we'll talk a lot about science and that. After the break.
My name is Keevan Kimball. I'm Keevan Kimball with Financial Services Innovation Coach. We came to cannabis 4 or 5 years ago. We are economic think tank. We do actually work on.
Move your mic.
Can you hear me? Okay. We are a think tank, financial services and economic empowerment. We work in states around the country with lower income communities, trying to help them figure out ways to improve their status. We do a lot of workforce, but cannabis was one of those opportunities where it was 4 or 5 years ago, before a lot of states actually passed it. We knew it was a long-term economic growth strategy for our communities, and we've been left out. We've been to Arizona, we've been to California, we've been to Arkansas. So we've seen at every step we're being left out, and our goal was to bring awareness, but to also kind of create an advocacy arm. Because there's no advocacy. The white guys advocate all the time. They spend a lot of money. They don't get those licenses by mistake, right? They get those licenses because they spend their money. And we've been pushing people to be more aggressive, not just complaining, but actually you have to play the game, and we've been left out. So that's what we really, we can go through a whole lot, we'll go through more, but at our level, our universities aren't getting research dollars, our communities aren't getting licenses, we aren't able to raise, we're not in the finance division. There are a lot of guys who make money financing stuff, we're not in that space, so we're just left out of the whole thing. We've fortunately got some licenses to sell, but the bigger picture, where all the wealth, it's like getting a grid distributorship, right? You've got to get that license, and the next 10 states left that haven't passed it, we're not on the floor of those, then we'll be complaining about this forever. It won't matter. Once the license is, it won't matter what happens. So, it's great.
Even what name was Mary Jane Oven. Good morning to all of the beautiful people. I I'm the founder of the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition. I'm a member of the Nez Perce Tribe of Idaho. So big shout out to the cannabis mecca of the world, Idaho, right? The reason that I say that and I state that is because when we talk about the education that needs to take place, we talk about the policy, the underlying weaponization policy that did occur 1492 and from there. It's been definitely used as a weapon in indigenous communities. I founded ICANC so that we could have 2020 vision. I founded it here in 2019 so that we could launch forward fully in 2020 with Tribal Hemp and Cannabis magazine to showcase what tribes are doing in the industry, agriculturally, textiles, how it's improving economies. We have a long ways to go in indigenous communities, and I can just tell you that my background comes in a huge spectrum. I visited my grandmother in a federal prison when I was 5 years old. She was incarcerated for growing cannabis on her property, on her lands. And fast forward to now, my 82-year-old grandmother would love to be in the industry. She owns 160 acres of land, but it's in trust by the federal government.
Yeah.
So that's the direction that ICANC will go, is looking for you all to step forward and help us in indigenous communities so that when we look at federal legislation and when we look at this legislation in the states, how is it being implemented to be beneficial for indigenous communities? Because right now I can tell you that the federal trust land status is keeping tribes from making any kind of move. And this is a reintroduction into our community. As I mentioned, it's in our DNA. It's in our bones. And we have a very robust shared history of agriculture between indigenous and black communities. And I really feel that this is going to be the impetus for change to elevate women's economy, as well as to discuss some of the unsettled land tenure issues. We have some very unsettling foundational law in this country. Johnson versus McIntosh. It needs overturned. Johnson versus McIntosh basically is a Supreme Court decision that said that indigenous people cannot have title to our lands because we are not a Christian nation. Yes, that ruling still stands to this day. That's why my grandmother cannot grow cannabis on her land because, and in the government's eyes to this day, because we are not Christian nations, we can't do what we need.
That's great, because they not eat.
A lot of things to do to move, a lot of work in moving forward, a lot of alliances to be built, definitely a lot of education that needs to take place. There are over 560 federally recognized tribes and less than 20 of them in this space. And so look forward to all of your love, power, and commitment to this female power plant to elevate all of our communities. That's the idea.
Okay. All right, is this better? Yeah. Awesome. All right. I'm just going to do this. How about this? Okay. So I just want to start with the basics because I'm not sure everybody really understands what equity is. We talk a lot about social justice. We talk a lot about diversity, which is, an annoying buzzword. But let's talk a little bit about equity. What is equity in the cannabis space? And if you could talk about any states that might be doing it right, in your opinion.
Let's go backwards. So no state's doing it right. If someone's telling you that they are, they're lying to your face. And I'm not saying this to be dramatic. I'm just saying it to be real because what's happening in the news narrative now is that people are like, oh, they're doing it right. Mass is doing it right. California is in fucking shambles. So I just want to make sure that when you hear someone telling you this is happening the right way, you need to know that that's not happening the right way.
They may have a program, right? So
Right.
definitely be aware of what people are calling an equity program. For example, in Michigan, their equity program has all to do with just location. And if you have
Opportunity
that
zones.
that location, you may get a discount to some degree on some of the but it's not the same as the equity program in Massachusetts. It's
Right.
not what's proposed in Illinois. It's not what